Hi, kindergarten, first and second grade leaders. We are preparing for November 11th. This week we are looking at the story of Jacob and Esau. If you remember last week, we saw God's promise to Isaac that he would have kids, and his wife, Rebecca, had twins named Jacob and Esau. And this week we're going to continue that story with talking about what happened once the boys grew up. You may be really familiar with this story. Jacob and Esau, twin brothers, fought from birth with each other. Remember, Jacob was born holding on to Esau's foot. Isaac had a vision, or I think Rebecca had the vision and message from God that her sons, the youngest, would rule over the older one. And so there was always this tension between the two boys, and we're going to see that played out later in life as Jacob tricks his dad into giving him the blessing that Esau was supposed to receive. Of course, we know, looking forward, that that was God's plan all along, but there were some consequences for Jacob in being tricky. And that's kind of the part that we're going to concentrate on with kids this week, is talk about how we can be tricky, and that God has a plan even in the middle of it all, and we can trust his plan and trust his promise. But sometimes there are tricks that are being played around us, or we're being the tricky one. And so we're going to look at disguises and ways that we hide. And so that's what we're looking at this week. Your activities, you're going to continue with your Simon Says. It looks like the kids are having fun playing Simon Says and figuring out ways that they can trick each other. If you will notice, we were purposeful in planning that this series because we knew we were getting to this lesson. So have fun and encourage kids to think about ways to be tricky. Not because we're trying to encourage kids to be tricky, but we want them to understand that trick God had purpose and plan in. That Jacob was the child chosen by God to carry the family line to follow God, to lead the family, and to teach the next generation to follow God too. The promises for Abraham and Isaac also became the promises for Jacob. And then at Bethel, God showed that his plan was to continue the covenant through Jacob's family and eventually a whole nation, leading to the birth of Jesus, the promised Savior. So even in the trick, even though we know tricks happen all around us, God is in the middle of working things out in his promise in the way he had intended for everything to be. All right, so you will move to your small group time. During your small group time, you're going to have a bag similar to this, and in the bag are some different items. What you're going to do, have you ever done a touchy-feely box kind of thing with kids at school, or maybe you did it when you were in school? What you're going to do, I'm looking for my blindfold, sorry. Found it. What you're going to do is choose one kid to wear the blindfold. And so you put the blindfold on the kid. It's like one of those that you sleep with, so they really shouldn't be able to see much at all through it. So put the blindfold on them, and then they're going to feel around in the bag. And what you're going to encourage them to do is try to use all of their senses, because when you're blind, like Isaac was at this time in his life, when you're blind, you have to use other senses to figure out what's in the bag. And then there's different things in the bag, and I'm going to tell you what they are so that you can help build the story for the kids. So there is a can of soup in there. There is a spoon in there. There is a bowl in there. There is a little piece of fur in there. There's going to be a water bottle in there, and the water bottle is really to signify oil, so I'm going to wrap around it and say that it's actually oil. Of course, if you're blind, you won't be able to tell that, but they will once they pull it out. And then there's a little pile of beans. So I'm using pinto beans because lentil beans are too little. Anyway, if you will notice, all of these things are things from the story. From the story of Jacob and Esau, and how Jacob prepared his dad some dinner, went in disguised as his brother Esau by putting fur on him, and fed him the soup and cooked it all in the oil. So all of this has to do with this story. And so, as the instructions say, give kids a chance, each one, to find all the items in the bag so that they can tell the story again, and make sure that they understand that while Jacob was tricky, and it was not a good thing for him to be tricky and to plot, because there is some consequences that Jacob deals with later, God still had a plan, and God was going to work his promise out regardless. No matter the situation, God's promise was that Isaac would have many kids, that would be the way that we get to know who our Savior is, through Abraham's family. And so Jacob, as promised to Rebekah, was the one to get that birthright so that the nation of Israel could come through Jacob, so that Jesus could be born in the house of David, in the family of Israel. So, big picture. I know we're getting a big picture, but we want the kids to see that really big picture. Your memory verse activity. I don't know how this is working out for you guys. I hope the kids are just learning the memory verse. You have a card in your packets that has all of the words for the memory verse on it, and then there's also little cards. They can play matching games with that. You could try to build a tower with the straws. You could also make up different ways for them to take turns saying the memory verse back and forth to you. And then you will pray and dismiss and send them on their way. Remember to continue to build relationships with kids. You guys are doing a fabulous job loving kids exactly where they are. I want to remind you, this Sunday we have our leadership dinner, our Thanksgiving meal to celebrate together as a family. I hope you guys will join us for that. It's actually one of my favorite events that we do. First off, because I absolutely love Thanksgiving food, but to me, this is just a time where we get to be together as families and just be together. I know that all of us don't have the same Thanksgiving memories. My favorite memories are Thanksgiving, and it was because of that, just being together. So please know that we thank you, even if you can't be there, for leading and loving kids. I'll talk to you soon.